All right. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And again, my name is Patrick Baker, and this is Zoom 101. And I thank you for allowing me to speak today and give you this presentation. And I hope you find it useful and informative. Just a little background about me. My business, as I mentioned, is Prime of Life Tech, and I have 30 years of IT experience. I provide IT education and tech support for older adults and small businesses, both on-site or remotely, like we're doing here over Zoom. So anyhow, there's more information about me and my business at primeoflifetech.com. So just a couple of more housekeeping items before we get started. First off, there's a lot of information packed into today's presentation. And your hands would get really tired from taking notes if you're a note taker. So, just before you prepare your hand for some writing fatigue, I just wanted to let you know that I'll be sharing a PDF copy of this presentation after the meeting, and Cheryl can probably email out that information to the participants. So there'll be a copy of the presentation. In addition to that, I have a couple of documents that I have available, what I call cheat sheets. There's a cheat sheet for folks who want to attend Zoom meetings as a participant. And then I also have a cheat sheet that I'll make available for folks who want to host their own Zoom meetings. So anyhow, and as I mentioned, if you would please use the raise your hand feature if you have a question, and or you can also enter a question in the chat. And if you're unfamiliar with those things, we'll be talking about those in more detail here in just a couple of minutes. So anyway, thanks again for having me here to speak today. So what we're going to talk about today then is essentially the Zoom basics for folks who want to participate in a Zoom meeting, and then some basic information for folks who want to host their own Zoom meetings. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions as well. So let's dive right in, and we're going to discuss the basics for Zoom meeting participants. So first thing, what I want to discuss as far as the meeting participants agenda is concerned, we're going to talk about how we join Zoom meetings, some of the controls that you have while you're in a Zoom meeting, and then as well, we'll be talking about the participants function that I just mentioned a moment ago, the chat function. We'll talk about sharing your screen, which is basically what I'm doing right now so that you can see the presentation, like what I'm doing here, and then how you leave a Zoom meeting. So when you join a Zoom meeting, there's really two ways to do this. You can use a Zoom meeting invitation link, probably along the lines of what you used today to join our session here. That's probably the easiest way, in my opinion, to join a Zoom meeting. You get an email or maybe a text message, you click or tap on that link and you join the meeting. It's pretty straightforward that way. Oftentimes, especially now, Zoom requires that you either have a password for your Zoom meetings if you're a meeting host, or that you use the waiting room function. Both of the one or the other of those is required.
Okay, well, look in your,
and so
Patrick?
anyhow, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, fine. We have a participant who can see you but cannot hear you. Can you see her? It's Wendy Hart.
I see somebody named Wendy. She just needs to, it depends on how she's joining the meeting. If she's joining on a tablet, she'll need to, well, actually either a tablet or on a computer. you need to make sure that you select an audio option.
Yeah, she said she logged on the first time, thought she clicked on that. She's logged off, logged back on, did not see that as an option.
Okay, so maybe close Zoom and then restart Zoom
Okay.
and then rejoin.
Okay.
Otherwise, she might be better served by calling in on her phone with one of the call-in numbers. Okay. At any rate, so let's go into the next part. So if you're joining by a Zoom meeting link, this is an example of a link. You might have seen something similar to this one. Oftentimes, a meeting host will embed the password for a Zoom meeting in the link itself. That's an option in the settings to allow that to happen. Otherwise, your meeting participants will have to click on a link and they may be prompted for a password to enter your meeting. So if you're on a smartphone or a tablet and you're wanting to join a Zoom meeting, you just tap on the link that you see in your email or in a text. Your mobile device will launch the Zoom app and automatically join the meeting. And then if you're prompted, as I mentioned before, you have to enter a password, and then it will also prompt you to choose the type of audio that you want to use, whether you're going to use your computer or your device's audio, or whether you're going to call in. So most people join or choose join with computer audio. If you're on a PC or a Mac, it's more or less the same experience. You excuse me, you click on the link, and your PC or Mac will launch a browser, and it'll launch the browser. It'll prompt you to open the meeting, and then you basically have to click on the option that says to join Zoom and launch Zoom and join the meeting. Again, you have to enter a password if prompted and choose the type of audio that you're going to use. Now, on the computer, on a Mac or a PC, when you get the box that pops up that says, do you want to join with computer audio or do you want to use your phone? There's a checkbox that you can check that basically says, always use my computer audio. So that way you don't get prompted for the audio selection each time you join a meeting. So that's an option that you can utilize when you're prompted. The other option that you have for joining a Zoom meeting is to join directly from Zoom itself. So you can tap the Zoom icon on a smartphone or a tablet to open Zoom. There's a big join button. You tap on that. You have to manually enter the meeting ID, so you would have to copy that information from the email that you're using, and you tap join. Again, password and your audio selection are things that you'll be asked to choose or enter or choose. And again, if folks have any questions, please speak up or raise your hand or use the chat feature. Thanks. And as far as a PC and a Mac is concerned, more or less the same process. You open Zoom, you click on the big join button, and you can enter the meeting ID and the password if necessary, and then use your audio to connect computer, or you can dial in on the phone. Any questions at this point? So joining the meeting is pretty straightforward. Once you get into a meeting, there's several controls at your disposal as a participant that you can use to to control your meeting experience and how you are, how you're perceived by others in the meeting in terms of the audio and the video that you're using for your Zoom experience. So a few things that I wanted to run through here are how you can, I wanted to discuss how you can make it so that the meeting controls are always visible on your screen. So you're not having to either move your mouse on a laptop or a desktop computer, or on a mobile device, a smartphone or a tablet. You have to tap the screen to be able to see the meeting controls in the first place. So that's something we'll look at. In addition, the speaker or the gallery view, that allows you to either see, the one, if I wasn't sharing my screen, the default view is to go into the speaker view. So basically my picture would be filling up your screen. And then gallery view is like the Brady Bunch or the Hollywood Squares view, where you see all the meeting participants in their little squares. There's some options there when people are presenting as far as how you can resize things that I'll talk about as well. Muting, video control, those are some other options that you have as well. So as far as making the meeting controls always visible, unfortunately, if you're using a smartphone, that feature is not available. So you have to always tap the screen for the meeting controls to appear if you're using a smartphone. However, if you're using a tablet, you can go through the steps that I listed here to make it so that the meeting controls, things like mute and the video, participants, those buttons that show up, that they're always visible. You tap the screen and then tap the gear icon for settings. Then you can go into meetings. And this is when you're outside of a meeting. This is in Zoom itself. Scroll down. And you literally tap the switch, a little slider switch that says always show the meeting controls. And then you can tap anywhere to close the settings on a tablet. On a PC or Mac, you go to the Zoom home screen within the Zoom program itself. You click on the home icon. That makes the gear icon visible. And then you click on the gear icon for settings. There's a bunch of options listed on the left. You click on accessibility, and then you just check the box to make the meeting controls always visible. So, and then you just click to close the settings. So pretty straightforward. If you want to play with that stuff right now, give it a try. You have to go back to the Zoom meeting to do that. So try not to lose the meeting in the shuffle if you're going to experiment with that. But it's a handy feature to have. Then speaker or gallery view. So if you haven't, if you're not already doing this, if you either tap on your screen, if you're on a tablet, or if you move your mouse, if you're on a PC or a Mac, you should see up in the, it depends on if you're on a tablet, I believe it's in the upper left corner. And on a PC or a Mac, it'll be in the upper right-hand corner. You should see a button that says Gallery View, or in the case of a tablet, like you see on the slide here, switch to Gallery View. If you haven't already done that, give that a try. That allows you to see all the other participants on the call. You have to have your video on, otherwise you'll just see the person's name or their profile picture. Excuse me. This is handy when you want to be able to see everybody on the call. If you're on a PC, a Mac, and I think you can do this on a tablet as well, there's like a dividing line between the picture, my picture in this case, or the picture of all the other participants, and the slideshow that you're seeing that I'm presenting. That divider line, you can either click and drag or press and drag with your finger. You can make the slides smaller, and you can make the view of the speaker or the other participants larger. So that's just a little tip there for modifying the view that you're seeing when you drag. the dividing line between the video image and the presentation or the screen share. Similarly, as I mentioned with the PC or a Mac, you just move your mouse. That gallery view button should show up in the upper right corner, and you just click on that guy. That button changes to, the label changes to speaker view, whether you're on a tablet or on a computer, and you can just toggle back and forth as you see fit. Mute control, that's the microphone icon that you see on your screen. The state that it's in the picture here is unmuted. So when you don't see the red line through it, that means that you are not muted, and therefore someone can hear you speak. And that's a toggle. So you just tap it to mute, tap it to unmute, and that works the same on any device. Likewise, the video control, if you wanted to start or stop your video camera, your webcam, you simply just tap the video icon, and it will either start or stop the video for your particular Zoom instance. Let's talk about participants. So on the participants tab, regardless of the device, you either tap the screen or move the mouse so that folks can see, or so that you can see the meeting controls, and then you tap or click on the participants button, and that makes the participants pane show up. Now, what you can do with participants will vary slightly depending on the device that you're using. So if I'm on a smartphone, I can invite others to the Zoom call that I'm on. So if I'm wanting to host a call, say with my friends or with family, I can just fire up the meeting, and then I can invite folks right from inside the meeting if I want to, using participants. Folks who are already on the call, you can, if you're on a smartphone, you can tap their name to start chatting with them. And then if you tap your own name, you can either raise your hand with the little blue raise hand function, or you can rename yourself if you wanted to change what your name, your display name looks like on your little square within Zoom, but how others see your name. On the tablet, very similar choices, inviting folks, chatting with others. In addition to raising your hand and renaming yourself, you can also mute or unmute your audio on a tablet from the participants tab. So, and the chat in particular, I just want to point out, just makes it easy to choose an individual if you needed to send a private message to a specific individual. The general chatting function, you can also do it both to the entire group or the entire, all the participants in the meeting rather, or individually as well. We'll get to that in a second. PC and Mac, similar. I can invite folks, I can mute myself, or I can raise my hand. And the mute is a toggle, just like tapping the button or clicking the button from the normal meeting controls. I'm either muting or I'm unmuting. So raise or lower hand likewise. And the host can also lower your hand for you when necessary. All right. Some additional commands in the participants panel for PC and MacBook. I can chat with an individual by just clicking on their name, and that basically launches the chat specifically for that person. You can hover over your own name and mute or unmute. And then you can also hover over your own name and click the More button, and that'll let you either rename yourself, or you can change out your profile picture if you wanted to use a different picture. Or if you have no picture, you can add one. All right. And again, if you have questions at any point, just raise your hand, or you should be able to unmute yourself and speak up as well. So the chat function, if I'm on a smartphone or a tablet, I'm going to tap the screen to show the meeting controls. I'm going to tap the More button, which is those three dots that you see with the red highlight there in my picture. And then from there, this little menu opens up, and I can tap on Chat to go into the chat panel. Once I'm in the chat panel, if I if I tap on where you see the red highlight there, if I tap on Everyone, it opens a menu that lists all the call attendees. So if I wanted to choose a specific person to chat with, I can do that from here. The default setting is that you'll be chatting to everybody on the call. Down below that red highlight in the picture, you see the words tap here to chat or tap a message to reply. If you tap in that space, that will open your keyboard and let you start entering your message to the individual or to all the people on the call. And then you tap the send over on the right to send the message that you just typed. PC and MacBook, similar process, just slightly different presentation. I click the chat icon to open the chat pane. And then from there, I can click on the To menu where you see the red highlight again, that blue button that says Everyone. I click on that and it'll list all the attendees, and I can pick and choose who I want to send a message to. Otherwise, I send the message to everyone. And then I can type in the space where it says type message here, and I can just press the enter key to send. Just a quick aside, if someone contacts you via the chat individually, so for example, if Cheryl were to send a message to me in the chat individually, where you see everyone in the picture there, that would switch automatically to Cheryl's name, and basically indicating that Cheryl is starting an individual conversation or an individual chat with me. And once, if I were to start typing and hit the enter key, I would be replying only to Cheryl. So it automatically switches over to the individual who messaged you in chat when that occurs. Lastly, a couple of options here on the PC and the Mac that you don't really have on the mobile devices. Those two buttons over there to the right of the red box, the File button and the three-dot menu, ... If I click on the three-dot menu, the option that comes up for me as a participant is to save the chat. So assuming that the host has allowed it, and then that's a setting, I can go in at the end of my meeting, and let's say, for example, I'm on a networking call, or maybe I'm on a call with family or friends, and folks have maybe shared like a link to a website that has some useful information, or maybe they've shared an email address of someone, or anything that you put into the chat. If the host allows it, you can save that chat in a text file and then reference it later. So you don't have to like copy everything down and paste it into some other document. Likewise, with the File button, if I click on the File button, I can share a file either from my own computer or from some like a cloud-based service like, say, OneDrive or Google Drive or iCloud or Dropbox even. So that's a pretty easy and convenient way to be able to share files with people on your Zoom call. The chat notifications, the Zoom chat displays messages sent to you privately or to everyone, whether or not that chat panel is open. You'll get a little pop-up that indicates that there's a message either to you individually or to the group. If you're on a smartphone or a tablet, you just have to tap on that message, and that will open the chat panel and allow you to chat with the individual or with the whole group. Likewise, on the PC or on a MacBook, you just click the chat button the same way you would normally launch the chat feature, and then you can interact with the messages that are there. All right, let's talk a little bit about sharing your screen. So right now, obviously, I'm using the share screen function to do this presentation. It's a really straightforward, really easy feature to use, really handy for situations like this where you're trying to convey a lot of information, and visual aids just make it that much easier to share that information. So first off, some requirements. You'll need to make sure that the host has enabled screen sharing. That's a feature. In fact, most of the configuration features are you have to go into the Zoom web portal. You go to zoom.us and you log in with your account. And then from there, you have the ability to go into a whole bunch of features that you can switch on or off to customize the meetings that you host with Zoom. Anyway, screen sharing is one of them. There's also a way within the Zoom program itself, excuse me, when you're hosting a meeting, like right in the middle of the meeting, you can enable screen sharing for participants to share their screens. So like, for example, right now I have screen sharing turned off, so Cheryl or someone else would not have the ability to share their screen right now. Hosts always have the ability to share their screen. So if you're hosting the meeting, you have the option to share it. Anyhow, the sharing, what you can share is limited to whatever programs you have running on your computer at the moment that you start sharing. You can also, though, share external media. By that, I mean like files, for example. You could share something, say, off of, like Dropbox or a website. And then in addition, excuse me, there's also some things like a virtual whiteboard that you can use so that if you as the host or other people on your call, they want to be able to use a whiteboard to draw and illustrate a point, that's also something that's available. And then a really handy feature as well is that the host, there's a remote control feature that allows the host to take over the computer of the person that's sharing. And believe it or not, for the work that I do, when I do a remote support session with someone, I actually do probably more than 90% of my remote support work using Zoom, because I can have the person that I'm working with share their screen, then I can request remote control, and virtually everything that you would need to do on someone else's computer, you can do over a Zoom call. Pretty handy. So anyhow, as far as other devices are concerned, screen sharing is not supported if you're using a Zoom on a smartphone. However, you can use they call it share content on a tablet. You tap your screen so the meeting controls appear. You tap the share content button, and then you'll get a menu like this one where you can choose what it is that you want to share. It's either going to be your screen, maybe it's from your photos, and as you can see, there's lots of options here for what I can share, even using a tablet, so pretty handy. Excuse me. And trying to be mindful of the time here. So on a PC or a MacBook, you just move your mouse to make the meeting controls appear. You click on share screen, and then similar process. In my case, this window pops up on my Mac, and I can choose among the different programs that I have running, or I can choose the whiteboard. But also notice there's some options here where I can attach. In this case, I could share something from an iPhone or an iPad using AirPlay, or share from an iPhone or an iPad if I had it hooked up to a cable, from a cable to my MacBook here. So, so there are some device-specific kind of options as well for how sharing might work for you. At any rate, once you begin sharing, the meeting controls, the toolbar kind of floats up there on the top of your screen, and that still allows you to access the controls for your Zoom meeting if you're the host. And also, if you're a participant, you would see a similar thing as well. You just may not see as many buttons on the toolbar. If you needed to switch programs as far as what you wanted to share, you would click on that new share button that you see there in green, and that allows you, that would basically open up this, this window here where all my programs are listed, and I could pick the other thing that I wanted to share. And then finally, when I'm finished with my presentation, I can click the stop share, the red button that you see here on the screen, and that would allow me to end the sharing session and just go back to the normal Zoom call, the way that you may be used to seeing it with just the people. So that's pretty much the end of the meeting participant portion. So if you have any questions, please speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the Zoom hosting part of the presentation. Okay.
So Patrick, do you want people to do it in the chat or unmute themselves and ask you verbally?
Either way.
Because they get to practice.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead and if you want to unmute yourself, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute. Otherwise, practice with that chat. Tap or click on chat and enter your question. Make sure that you have everyone is the default selection. But go ahead and post your question to everyone, or if you'd rather send it to me privately, that's fine too. But at any rate, if there aren't any immediate questions, I'm going to move on to Zoom basics for meeting hosts. So there's certain requirements that you'll need to meet in order to host a Zoom meeting. We'll talk about those briefly. We'll talk about how to launch an instant Zoom meeting. In other words, no planning ahead. You just boom. You're firing up a Zoom meeting, and then you invite people to join. You can also schedule a Zoom meeting, much like what we did for today, where the meeting information gets either emailed or sent in some form or posted on social media. That basically includes a link as well as the meeting ID and password. And then we'll also talk about ways of managing your Zoom meetings. So as far as the hosting requirements are concerned, you do need to create a Zoom account to host a meeting. You don't have to create a Zoom account to join a Zoom meeting, in case you were wondering. You could literally just download the Zoom app and click on a meeting link to join it, no problem. But I think it's a good idea to create a Zoom account anyway, Zoom actually sends useful information periodically, and it's good to be informed of those kinds of things. Plus, if you ever want to host your own Zoom calls, you have to create an account. Even if it's just a call with, like, your grandkids or your neighbors, you still have to create that account. Zoom has a free account that you can use, and you can host a meeting up to 40 minutes in length on a free account. The paid accounts, they have different tiers of paid account as far as features and capabilities are concerned, and that's not even factoring in the webinar feature that Zoom also has that option as well. But the paid account is right around $15 a month, I want to say, and that essentially gives you unlimited meetings. I think there is a hard limit, but it's like some ridiculous number of hours in length. As I mentioned earlier, there are numerous options available on zoom.us for configuring your meetings. Sorry, was there a question? Okay. All right, never mind. Let's see here. So lots of options for configuring Zoom, and I can, depending on how much time we have at the end, I can at least point some of the key things out to you on zoom.us. But as I mentioned in my in the introduction. I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat message as I'm trying to speak at the same time. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. I'll admit that right now. At any rate, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'll be providing links to the Zoom cheat sheets for hosts and for participants. And the meeting participants, the meeting host cheat sheet goes into pretty extensive detail as far as a lot of the meeting options are concerned. So anyway, I would use that as a reference, which I'll be sharing with you here shortly. To optimize your Zoom experience, I think it's worth investing in a microphone. I don't know if you can see what I'm wearing here. This is a Bluetooth headset. It just has, the speaker for the one ear, but it has this boom microphone that pretty much hangs right next to my mouth. My setup, I have a MacBook Pro, and actually the microphone and speakers that are built in are pretty good on a Mac anyway. And I think on newer PCs as well. But I think having the microphone closer to your body, closer to your mouth is better, a more optimal experience. I think headphones are really helpful. I have some partial hearing loss, so I like having the speaker right in my ear like that. Headphones are good. I also think I think lighting for optimal video. You may have seen those ring lights that you can get that basically you hang them or position them behind your computer so that it's pointed right at your face. Those optimize the visual side of things for your video. A question that came in the chat was, is there any way to have closed captioning in Zoom? Zoom, the short answer is yes, but it's not an automatic thing. In other words, it's not like a real-time thing where I'm speaking and you literally see the captions scrolling on the screen. Unfortunately, Google Meet does have that capability to do real-time, real-time captioning. So at any rate, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Next, let's talk about starting an instant Zoom meeting. So an instant Zoom meeting is basically where I start the meeting without sending out an invitation, without going through the scheduling piece. I'm literally starting a meeting, and then I can share out that information in whatever way seems appropriate. So in this case, if and this is pretty much device independent, right? I click on the home icon if I'm not already there. I click on the new meeting icon, which is that big orange button with the white video camera on it. And boom, my meeting has started. It uses your personal meeting ID. Again, you have to create a Zoom account to be able to do this. When you create a Zoom account, it generates for you a personal meeting ID, which you can use at any time. There's an option in all of those numerous settings on zoom.us to not use a personal meeting ID, to not even have one. Excuse me. I don't recommend using it. It's just not, but it's not, it's either way, it works fine. If you have that, if you happen to have that option enabled, it will just generate a unique meeting ID for your meeting, which is what it does, generally speaking, when you're using the schedule function. If I'm scheduling my Zoom meetings, I can do it one of two ways. I can schedule through the zoom.us web portal, or I can use the Zoom desktop program or mobile apps. In the example I'm going to walk through for today's presentation, I'm going to focus on the desktop app. But I have instructions for both in my Zoom host cheat sheet. So, oh, actually, I guess I did include it for both. So if, but the pictures will probably only reflect the desktop version. So if I'm on a mobile phone or a desktop, I click or tap on schedule. I enter my topic for the meeting, or I can just use the default text that Zoom provides, enter a start date and time, and then depending on whether you're using a mobile device or zoom.us or the desktop app, I'm either going to select the duration of the meeting, so how long is my meeting, like 1 hour, 30 minutes, whatever, or I'm specifying the end date and time. Should I use a password or the waiting room? Passwords are, you may have heard about the phenomenon called Zoom bombing, where folks were basically getting uninvited guests to their meetings. Passwords and waiting rooms are both security features that allow you to basically screen who joins your meeting. You got to have the meeting password to get in, or if you're using the waiting room, you can actually admit people individually, which is what I did at the beginning of this meeting until I turned it off. Anyway, so you can choose whether you're going to use one or both of those features as you're scheduling your meeting. And anyway, then you click the schedule button or tap the schedule button and you scheduled your meeting. You share your meeting invitation. In this case, I'm looking at the desktop options where I would click on meetings from my little toolbar at the top of the Zoom app. I select the meeting that I want to share the information, and then I click the copy invitation button. Then from there, I can paste the meeting invitation information into an email or a text message, or I could share it on social media if I wanted to. Optionally, you can copy, paste, and only send the URL, the web address for the Zoom meeting. You don't have to send everything if you don't want to. You can invite others to a meeting in progress, as I mentioned earlier when we were discussing the participants tab. You show the meeting controls. You click or tap on participants, click or tap on invite, and then you can email the meeting invitation to other people and have them join your meeting. So as far as managing your Zoom meeting, before I go any further, let me just check. Okay, great. All right, so I just check in the chat. So managing your Zoom meeting. So there are some security features that I want to make you aware of as far as your Zoom meetings are concerned. Then we'll talk about starting your Zoom meeting, using the waiting room, managing your participants, and then we'll touch briefly on chat and polling. So, as I mentioned earlier, meeting passwords, Zoom wants you to use a meeting password. They encourage you to use a meeting password, mostly so that you don't have uninvited guests. So you have to, for meetings that require a password, you got to have that password or you just can't get in. And I've had Zoom calls where the password information wasn't published and people were joining the meeting but had no way to actually get into the thing. So those are two key pieces of information, the meeting ID and the password. And you can embed the password in the meeting URL. It's a feature that you would have to enable on zoom.us, but it's a pretty straightforward process. As I mentioned earlier as well, the waiting room is a really handy feature. It essentially allows you to screen the folks that are coming into your Zoom meeting. The only caveat with the waiting room is that you as the meeting host, you have to have the participants tab visible in order to see who's in the waiting room and so that you can also admit them. So for example, if I get, 5-10 minutes into the meeting and I'm no longer watching the waiting room, if new people are joining my meeting and they can get stuck in the waiting room. So one of the things that you can do, and which I in fact did for this presentation, for this Zoom meeting, was I had the waiting room enabled initially, but once the meeting got underway, I disabled the waiting room. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want folks to get stuck in the waiting room. Now, you may say to yourself, well, gee, I thought that was a security measure to make sure you don't have any uninvited guests. And it is. And yeah, I was taking maybe a little bit of risk by switching off the waiting room. But I think the benefit of doing that and not blocking people from joining your meeting outweighs the slightly extra measure of security that you have. I shouldn't say slightly, the extra measure of security that you have by using the waiting room. I also think that hopefully any bad actors, they're going to join in the first few minutes. But there's an alternative as well. You can still keep the waiting room enabled or turned on, but you can also specify that someone else on the call is your co-host. You can make someone a co-host, and by doing that, you essentially give them all of the rights or privileges that the host would have on the Zoom call, and that co-host could be the person who monitors the waiting room and admits people, while the main host proceeds with the conducting the meeting or doing their presentation. So at any rate, the screen sharing, by the way, the picture that you see on the right there, that's an illustration of the what's on the menu. If you have these, you click on the security button. The security button is not something you're going to see if you're a meeting participant. You only see the security button if you're a meeting host or a co-host. And as you can see, there's several options there. The ones that have the check mark next to them are features that are turned on or enabled. So as you can see in this example, there's no check mark next to screen share. So screen sharing is not allowed in this particular Zoom meeting. Also, you can see that there's two options at the very top of that menu, lock meeting. Lock meeting is another thing that you can use if you don't want uninvited guests to join your meeting. So say, for example, I had a meeting scheduled and I had 15 people invited to my meeting. Once all my meeting participants show up, I can lock the meeting. And then it doesn't matter if I have the waiting room enabled. It doesn't matter if someone has the meeting ID and the password. If the meeting's locked, you can't get in. So that's just another security feature that you can use. The other thing that you can do is you can disable the chat. If you just click on chat in this menu here under the security button, excuse me, you can disallow chat, and that essentially just sort of, it eliminates distractions or any sort of noise in the background while you're conducting your meeting. You may not want people chatting amongst themselves for some segment of the meeting. I've been on a lot of networking calls where sometimes the host will leave the chat disabled until the very end, and then they'll turn the chat on so people can share their contact information and things like that. Excuse me, doing a lot of talking. So to start your scheduled Zoom meetings, you can, in the case of the desktop app, you can start the meeting either from the home screen or the meeting screen just by clicking the start button. So as I mentioned, the waiting room allows you to screen who comes into your meeting. This is something you can enable while you're scheduling the meeting. There's an advanced options that you can open up at the bottom of the screen where you create a Zoom meeting or schedule a Zoom meeting in the Zoom app or desktop program. You can also enable the waiting room after the meeting starts by going to that security button, as I mentioned before. Let's see, but as I also mentioned, the caveat is that you have to monitor the participants tab, and you can disable the waiting room in the middle of the meeting, as I mentioned before. So as far as managing your participants are concerned, on a PC or a MacBook, you're going to do all of this through the participants panel or tab or whatever you want to call it. You make your, you show the meeting controls, you click on participants, you can point to a specific individual in the list of participants and then click on the More button. Once you do that, you're going to see this this menu here. So the menu allows you to, in this case, if you click chat, you'll be chatting with that person, but you can also control that person's video. You can stop their video. Another option, if their video was not already running, that option would state, ask participant to start their video, as an example. You can make anyone in the participants list the meeting host, where you're no longer the host. Say I had to leave and the meeting needed to continue without me, I could specify a different individual as the meeting host, because when the host leaves the meeting ends for everybody. So if I were to say leave meeting right now, this whole thing would drop. Co-host, again, as I mentioned earlier, allows you to share the hosting duties, like monitoring the waiting room, for example. You can rename the individual if they're having trouble doing it themselves. You can also put them back in the waiting room. So you can essentially put someone in timeout, as it were, and park them there for any reason at any time. The last two options are kind of items of last resort. You can remove someone from the meeting. If you have someone who's, for whatever reason, you want them out of the meeting altogether, you can remove them. There's an option on Zoom.us to allow people who were removed from a meeting to rejoin the meeting, and that is turned off by default. So it's assumed that if you removed someone, you don't want them jumping right back on, okay? Then the very last option is you report them to Zoom. If you report them to Zoom, that is essentially like reporting them to the authorities. They can have their account suspended for that. So that's probably, as I mentioned, an item of last resort. And let's see, I know I'm running up on time here, so I want to try to wrap it up because I do want to allow folks to answer questions. As I mentioned earlier, chatting, the chat function can be enabled or disabled. It can either be done, there's some configuration options as well. You can allow file sharing or whether or not people can even save the chat. And as I mentioned before, using the security button, you can just disable the chat altogether while the meeting is in progress. There's a polling function as well. I'll encourage you to just read up about that. And there's some information on that in the cheat sheet. Anyhow, I'm gonna open it up for questions if folks want to, in fact, let me open the participants tab. I'm gonna unmute everybody. And so now you're all unmuted. And if anyone has any questions, please, please jump right in. Okay.
Very good. Good job.
Okay. I'm going to mute the person with the background noise. Since there aren't any questions, and then again, I'll share this. Cheryl, are you present, Cheryl? Okay. Well, Cheryl, I'll contact you after the meeting. I wanted to just make sure that folks have, I want to make sure that you have these links so that you can access the documentation that I mentioned.
And I have one of the guys from Rehab.
And in addition, I will be sharing the slides as a PDF as well. This is just a little plug for my own online learning classes. I do twice a month, I do an online learning sessions over Zoom called Senior Tech Coffee. And I have these topics scheduled for the 10th and the 24th. And if you'd like more information, you can go to my website and at this address here, and you can get the details on that. And let's see, in addition, I've included my contact information. If you need some help with your tech, I'm more than happy to help folks. I help both older adults as well as small businesses. And I thank you for joining us today. And let's see, Monica, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Well, I think I do. Can you use the chat method if you are already muted and not on video? I was trying to send a message, but I had myself on mute. I didn't know if it was going through, so.
Oh, yeah, you should be able to use chat without having, with your microphone muted. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I will be calling you because I have, do you deal with other tech problems like on a PC where the documents are all muddled up and my files, I don't have things sorted properly and I can't find anything?
Yeah, sure
I need
thing.
a total shake up.
Understood. Yeah, I'd be happy to help you out with anything along those lines. You
Yeah,
bet.
it's a mess. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. Well, we're a few minutes over, but I have the time if anyone has any other questions.
I was wondering how we are getting that information on the,
Yes. So as far as the cheat sheets
Yeah.
and the slides are concerned, Cheryl, are you there, Cheryl?
Yes. Yes, I
Cheryl, if I email you some information, can you email that information to all the meeting participants?
I can because they registered and they all have email. So I'd be happy to do that once you send it to me.
Perfect. That would be great. Yeah, a little echo there.
Yeah.
Little feedback. Yeah, so I'm gonna, as I don't know, I'm not sure you were here at the very, very beginning, but as I mentioned, I want to be able to share with folks the slides from today, which I'll have in PDF form. And then I have what I call my cheat sheets for meeting participants and meeting hosts. And I'm sorry, I don't remember who was just asking, but they were wondering how were they going to get that information. So I'll send you an email with information to pass on to the folks who are on the call today.
thank you.
Thank you so much. It was Linda. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Anyone else before we call it a wrap? All right. Well, if you have any questions, my contact information will be included in the slide deck, as well as I think there was some information, some of my contact information in the email that Cheryl sent yesterday with the meeting link, if you needed to get a hold of me sooner than later. But otherwise, look for the email from Cheryl. And thank you once again for joining today.
Thank
I
you.
hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye, folks.
Thank you.